Hi, this is the WTF SDK item creation tutorial part 3. So in the previous tutorial, we've created a basic kind of item trinket with a product effect. And in this tutorial, we will expand upon that and create a item trinket that actually uses the final editor that we will cover here, which is the Projectiles editor. So before we begin, we'll need to create animations and particle effects for the projectile that we'll be using. So the first thing that we'll be touching on is actually the animations package editor again. So for this particular particle, projectile, we'll be needing two different particles. One for the projectile itself and one for the particle effects that surrounds the projectile. The creation process for the animation packages are pretty much identical to the one we did in the last tutorial. So I will basically just run through this process without spending too much time explaining the details. So and I have already imported the resources that I need from the last tutorial, so I will not be repeating that process. So this is the seed particle that I'm looking for. I'm going to hit save. And need to create another new particle. And same thing as before, I'll only be importing one image. Alright, and that's basically all I need in order to start making my projectile. But before that, I will be creating the effects that are needed for the projectile. So there's two effects that I'll be creating. One for the explosion that will occur when the projectile hits something, and then one more for the trail of particles that the projectile leaves behind. So let me go in here and create a new particle effect. And this will be a standard effect like the other ones. And I'll swap the base particle to this seed particle. And since the original effects already has this kind of explosion-like look and feel, all I have to do is really adjust a couple minor parameters to make it look halfway decent. And obviously you can spend a lot more time to make these effects look even better. But since I'm not going to use up too much of the tutorial's time here, this is what I'll be setting at. So I'm going to save quickly and move on to the next particle effect. So this one is going to work a little bit differently than the ones that we've seen before. And you'll actually see the difference fairly quickly when I switch the effect type from standard to projectile. So I'm actually going to use the same seed, but as you can see, instead of a single effect, the preview allows you to see it as a trail of multiple effects being used in a single line. And this is actually how the effect is going to look like in-game. So as you can see, the trail looks a little bit too busy. So one of the things I'm going to do is to reduce the particle count. And usually trails don't need to have spread that looks like that, so I'm going to reduce the spread of the particles here. And I will add a strong fade to the particles so that maybe that's too strong, but the idea remains the same, is that you want to see an actual trail of particles going forward. So that looks good, and I'm going to hit save. So that's all the materials we need for the projectile. And now it's time to actually create the projectile. So here I am. I'll switch to the projectiles tab, and I am going to hit new. And just like all the other editors, you start out by filling the basic information of the projectile. And we are actually going to create a fireball here. Some basic parameters like damage. We'll create one that has the same damage range as our previous spell. And we'll be using a normal projectile, which just kind of shoots something out directly. You can also create area effects, which doesn't actually require a projectile-based animation package. We just need to create the particle effects for the area effect. So I'm going to switch to this fire projectile, and we will use the fire particle trail that I've created. And as you can see, that's basically how the trail works. It basically generates a trail as the particle is moving forward. I'm going to speed up this particle slightly. And you can play around with these parameters on your time, as you're creating your own particle, but most of them are pretty self-explanatory. So the last thing that I need to do is to add an explosion effect to the projectile for when it actually hits an object. And you can kind of see the projectile disappearing right now when it hits the barrel, which is your test target. And obviously I didn't explicitly say it, but you can drag this thing around by clicking and dragging this barrel, and it reacts to gravity. So the explosion effect is added through this particular location, the impact properties, and you basically select the effect that occurs when the object is hit. So as you can see, it centers on the object. As the projectile hits the barrel. So that's basically it for the projectile, and so the final phase is to move on to the item editor. Obviously I need to save first and create a new item and fill out all the same info pretty much as the last time. I'm going to change it to trinket. Basically anything that you want to create in the game as a spell, you will need to go through the item editor and create a trinket for it. There's actually a way for you to teach the player these spell trinkets as abilities, and I will probably write something about that in the wiki also when I have time. So I'm going to go through and select both the inventory icon and the drop icon for this particular item. And I will be doing the same thing as before. So instead of direct target, this will be a cast spell. And I will say change the casting time to 2 seconds, and we'll have no cooldown this time. So to make a trinket use a projectile, you use the same proc system that I've done in the other tutorial. And to create a projectile, you create a new prop, change the type to projectile, and select the fireball projectile. And you can see the description is actually incomplete. So what you want to do is, and you will see the description being filled at the beginning of this entire line. And you can basically leave the rest alone, since the projectile itself takes care of all the related particle effects. So I'm going to hit OK there. And that's pretty much it. So I am going to hit save. And we will actually start the test right now. So let me close this. So as I'm entering the demo, some of you might have noticed that I didn't actually add this item to the quest that I've been using to test the items. And that's because I am going to show you how to use the developer's console to basically spawn items, quests, and NPCs into the game. Basically, these things can be used for testing purposes. If you want to jump into the game and just start testing a particular quest or item that you've created without running through all the hoops, this is the way to do it. So to open up the developer console, you want to hold down Control, Shift, and then hit the tilde key, which is usually found next to the one arrow key on the upper left-hand side of the keyboard. So the first thing that you'll notice when you open up the developer console is there's a ton of text, most of which you don't really have to worry about. You can kind of trace through the game state as they progress from the starting screen to where we are right now, but most of these are just things to track the progress of the game. What's important though is that if you found some problems in the game, you might be able to open up the developer's console and look for messages that begins with the word error, which means that there's probably something wrong with one of your characters or items or things that you've created that just doesn't really work in the game. Usually the error message will have something helpful for you to look up what exactly is wrong. But as for right now, we will be, first we'll want to clear this thing out. The command for clearing the screen is CLS, same as the DOS command that, if you remember using DOS. So the next thing that I want to do is to say find item. Actually, let me type help, because that would basically give you a list of all the commands that you can use. And what I want to do is spawn an item. So what I say is spawn item name. But I actually don't know the name, so the thing that I want to do now is to find the item. And if you don't remember what the item's name is, you can just type find item and it will have a list of all the items. So I am trying to add a fireball actually, so I'm going to say spawn item fireball, and I picked it up right away. So I'm going to equip it, and I am going to find the character running around and use it on him. So that's a little. So as you can see, it functions exactly as we planned. It shoots the projectile with the trail, and when it hits the character, it creates that particle effect and actually kill them. So I would like to thank you for watching this series of tutorial videos, and I hope to see your own creation using the WTF SDK very soon. Goodbye.